You think you've lost everything, don't you? You're sitting there in the wreckage of what you thought was your life, and the silence is deafening. The job is gone. The relationship has crumbled. The dreams you carried like sacred artifacts have turned to dust in your hands. You feel like you're drowning in a sea of your own failures, gasping for air that tastes like regret and bitter disappointment. But what if I told you that this moment, this precise instant of absolute devastation, is not your ending but your beginning? What if the very ground you think has collapsed beneath you is actually the foundation upon which you'll build something magnificent? Friedrich Nietzsche understood this paradox better than perhaps any philosopher who ever lived. He wrote, "What does not kill me makes me stronger." But those words have been so commercialized, so trivialized, that we've forgotten their revolutionary power. When Nietzsche spoke of strength, he wasn't talking about the kind of resilience that bounces you back to where you were before. He was talking about the kind of transformation that makes returning to your old self impossible, unthinkable, even repulsive. He was talking about the death of who you were and the birth of who you could become. You see, rock bottom isn't a place you fall to by accident. It's the place where all your unconscious patterns, all your inherited beliefs, all your borrowed dreams finally reveal themselves as the illusions they always were. Carl Jung would say you've encountered your shadow at last. All those aspects of yourself you've been running from, denying, projecting onto others. The failure, the weakness, the parts of you that don't fit the pretty picture you painted for the world. And now, stripped of all pretense, you're face to face with the truth of who you actually are, beneath all the masks you've worn. But here's what most people don't understand about rock bottom. It's not a punishment. It's a gift. It's the moment when life stops lying to you and starts telling you the truth. The truth about what you've been accepting that you shouldn't have accepted. The truth about what you've been chasing that was never really yours to chase. The truth about the person you've been trying to be, who was never really you at all. Rock bottom is where pretense goes to die, and authenticity is born. Think about it. When did you last make a choice that was truly yours? Not a choice influenced by what your parents expected, what society demanded, what your friends would think, or what would keep you safe and comfortable. When did you last look at your life and say, "This is exactly what I want, and I don't care if the whole world thinks I'm crazy for wanting it"? Probably never, because most of us never get the chance. We're too busy climbing ladders that are leaning against the wrong walls, pursuing goals that were programmed into us before we were old enough to question them. But now all those ladders have collapsed. Now all those voices telling you who to be have gone quiet. Now, in this silence, in this emptiness, you can finally hear your own voice. And that voice, that authentic self that's been buried under layers of conditioning and compromise, is asking you a question that will determine the entire trajectory of your future. What do you choose when you have nothing left to lose? Nietzsche called this the eternal recurrence. He asked, what if you had to live this exact life with all its pain and joy, over and over again for eternity? Would you embrace it or curse it? But I think he was really asking something deeper. He was asking whether you would choose your life, truly choose it, with full knowledge of its cost. Because that's what rock bottom gives you. The clarity to see the real cost of everything. The cost of staying where you are. The cost of continuing to live someone else's life. The cost of never risking everything for something that might be magnificent. Jung spoke of individuation, the process by which we become who we truly are, distinct from all the collective expectations and projections we've absorbed. He said this process often begins with what he called the night sea journey, a descent into the depths of our own psyche where we confront everything we've been avoiding. This is your night sea journey. This is your descent into the underworld of your own soul. And like all mythic heroes who make this journey, you will not return unchanged. You know what's beautiful about being at rock bottom? Nobody expects anything from you anymore. The pressure is off. You can't disappoint anyone because their expectations have already been shattered. You can't fail because you've already failed. You can't lose face because your face is already in the dirt. This is the most liberating position in the world because it's the only position from which you can move in any direction you choose, guided by nothing but your own authentic desire. But authentic desire is terrifying, isn't it? Because it demands everything from you. It doesn't care about your excuses, your fears, your carefully constructed reasons why you can't have what you really want. Authentic desire looks at your circumstances and says, "So what?" It looks at your limitations and says, "We'll see about that." It looks at what everyone else thinks is impossible and says, "Maybe for them, but not for me." Nietzsche wrote about the Übermensch, the overman, the person who has overcome the limitations of conventional morality and created their own values. But he wasn't talking about becoming superhuman. He was talking about becoming fully human, authentically human, courageously human. He was talking about people who refuse to let their past define their future, who refuse to let their circumstances dictate their choices, who refuse to accept "that's just the way things are" as the final word on anything. And that's what rock bottom offers you, the chance to become your own Übermensch, not by denying your humanity, but by embracing it completely. By looking at your failures and saying, "Yes, this is part of my story, but it's not the end of my story." By looking at your pain and saying, "This has taught me something valuable about what I don't want, and now I'm going to use that knowledge to create what I do want." The choice you're facing right now is the most important choice you'll ever make, and it's also the simplest. You can use this devastation as evidence that you're broken, that life is unfair, that dreams are foolish and hope is naive. You can let this experience confirm every limiting belief you've ever held about yourself and your possibilities. You can become bitter, cynical, resigned to a smaller life than the one you once imagined. That's one choice, and it's the choice most people make because it's easier. It requires nothing from you. It demands no growth, no risk, no courage. Or you can use this devastation as raw material. You can look at the rubble of your old life and say, "Perfect. Now I have space to build something better." You can treat your failures as education, your pain as motivation, your emptiness as potential waiting to be filled with something magnificent. You can decide that since you've already lost everything you thought you needed to be happy, you might as well try living according to your own rules for once. Jung said that our greatest fear is not that we are inadequate, but that we are powerful beyond measure. And nowhere is this more true than at rock bottom, because rock bottom strips away all the external sources of power you thought you needed. The title, the money, the relationship, the approval, the security, all gone. And in their absence, you discover that there's another kind of power, one that was always there, waiting for you to claim it. The power to choose your response to any circumstance, the power to create meaning from chaos, the power to decide that your story isn't over just because one chapter has ended badly. This is what Nietzsche meant when he talked about amor fati, love of fate, not passive acceptance of whatever happens to you, but active embrace of your life as raw material for something beautiful. Every failure, every rejection, every moment of despair becomes part of the sculpture you're creating with your choices. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is meaningless. Everything is material for the masterpiece of your becoming. But here's the thing about rock bottom. It won't wait for you forever. This moment of clarity, this opportunity to choose differently, it has an expiration date. Soon, if you don't act, new circumstances will arise. New distractions will appear. New excuses will present themselves. The voices of fear and conformity will start whispering again, telling you to play it safe, to settle for less, to accept what is instead of reaching for what could be. And if you listen to those voices, you'll climb back up to exactly where you were before, and you'll stay there until life sends you another wake-up call. So let me ask you this. What would you attempt if you knew you could not fail? What dream have you abandoned because it seemed too big, too risky, too different from what people like you are supposed to want? What version of yourself have you been too afraid to become because it would mean disappointing people who are invested in keeping you small? Rock bottom is asking you these questions, demanding answers, refusing to let you hide behind excuses anymore. The beautiful paradox of rock bottom is that it's simultaneously the place of greatest despair and greatest possibility. Despair, because everything you thought you knew about yourself and your life has been proven wrong. Possibility, because now you get to discover who you really are and what you're really capable of when you stop trying to be who you think you should be. Nietzsche faced his own rock bottom when his academic career ended, when his health failed, When his philosophy was rejected by his contemporaries, he could have given up, could have accepted that he was a failure, could have lived quietly in obscurity. Instead, he used that devastation as fuel for some of the most revolutionary thinking in human history. He wrote, "You must have chaos within you to give birth to a dancing star. Your chaos, your rock bottom, is pregnant with your dancing star." The person you were before this fall, were they really living? Or were they just surviving, going through the motions, following a script written by someone else? Because if you're honest, if you really look at the life that's now in pieces around you, you'll probably admit that it wasn't working anyway. It wasn't making you happy. It wasn't fulfilling you. It wasn't bringing out the best in you. It was just familiar, comfortable, safe. And safety, while necessary for survival, is often the enemy of growth. Now you have the chance to be dangerous. Not dangerous to others, but dangerous to the status quo. Dangerous to the idea that people like you don't get to have extraordinary lives. Dangerous to the belief that dreams are for other people, that greatness is reserved for the chosen few, that you have to accept whatever life hands you instead of demanding what you actually want. Jung wrote about synchronicity, the meaningful coincidences that seem to guide us toward our destiny. Maybe your rock bottom isn't a random catastrophe. Maybe it's a perfectly timed intervention from a universe that knew you were stuck, knew you were living below your potential, knew you needed to be shaken awake. Maybe this isn't punishment but redirection. Maybe this isn't ending but beginning. The choice is yours, and it's available to you right now. You can treat this moment as the worst thing that ever happened to you, or you can treat it as the best thing that ever happened to you. You can see it as evidence of your inadequacy, or you can see it as proof of your readiness for something greater. You can use it to justify shrinking, or you can use it to fuel your expansion. But whatever you choose, choose consciously, choose deliberately, choose with full awareness that this decision will ripple through every day of the rest of your life. Because rock bottom isn't just a place you visit, it's a crossroads. And the direction you choose to walk from here will determine whether you become a cautionary tale or an inspiration, whether your pain becomes your prison or your power. You see, there's something else about rock bottom that most people miss entirely. It's not just that you've lost everything you thought you needed. It's that you've discovered everything you thought you needed was actually keeping you prisoner. The job that drained your soul but paid your bills. The relationship that felt safe but slowly suffocated your spirit. The social circle that accepted you but only the sanitized version of you. The routine that gave you structure but gradually became your cage. Rock bottom isn't just loss. It's liberation from a life that was slowly killing the most essential parts of who you are. Think about the last time you felt truly alive, truly excited about possibility. How long ago was it? Months, years, maybe decades? When did you stop believing that extraordinary things could happen to you? When did you start accepting that dreams were for other people, that you were meant to live quietly in the margins of your own life? This acceptance didn't happen overnight. It was a gradual surrender, a slow strangulation of your vital force, your life energy, what the ancients called your elan vital. Nietzsche understood that most people live what he called the herd mentality, following the crowd, accepting conventional wisdom, choosing security over authenticity. But he also understood that some people, at certain crucial moments, break free from the herd and choose to become who they really are. He called these moments dangerous knowledge, because once you see the truth about your life, you can never unsee it. Once you realize you've been living someone else's dream, you can never pretend it's your own again. And that's terrifying, isn't it? Because once you acknowledge that your old life wasn't really working, you become responsible for creating a new one. Once you admit that you've been settling, you lose the right to settle again. Once you see that you've been playing small, you can no longer hide behind the excuse that this is just how things are. The comfortable prison of your old life becomes an impossible prison, because now you know it's a prison. Jung talked about what he called the unlived life, the parts of ourselves we sacrifice for acceptance, security, or convenience. He said the unlived life doesn't disappear. It goes underground into what he called the shadow, where it ferments and eventually demands expression. Sometimes this demand comes as depression, sometimes as anxiety, sometimes as a vague sense that something essential is missing from your life, and sometimes it comes as a complete collapse, a shattering that forces you to confront everything you've been avoiding. Your rock bottom isn't random. It's your unlived life demanding its due. It's your authentic self staging a revolution against the false self you've been maintaining. It's your soul saying, "Enough. We're not doing this anymore. We're not pretending anymore. We're not settling anymore." And the beautiful thing about your soul is that it doesn't negotiate. It doesn't accept excuses. It doesn't care about your fears or your practical concerns. It only cares about truth, about authenticity, about you becoming who you were meant to be. But becoming who you were meant to be requires what Nietzsche called the revaluation of all values. You have to question everything you've been told about what constitutes a successful life. The career ladder, the accumulation of possessions, the need for constant security, the importance of what other people think. All of it has to be examined. All of it has to be consciously chosen or consciously rejected. Because what if everything you've been chasing was actually moving you further away from happiness? What if the very things you thought would fulfill you were the things keeping you empty? I want you to imagine something. Imagine you're 90 years old, sitting in a chair looking back at your life. From that vantage point, what would you regret more? The risks you took that didn't work out, or the risks you didn't take because you were afraid they wouldn't work out? Would you regret the times you followed your heart and failed? Or the times you ignored your heart and succeeded at something that didn't matter to you? Would you regret the moments you were authentically yourself and faced rejection? Or the years you were someone else and gained acceptance? The 90-year-old version of you already knows the answers to these questions, and that version of you is begging the current version of you to stop wasting time on things that don't matter and start investing everything in the things that do. But what are those things? What really matters to you when you strip away all the should and ought and have-tos that have been governing your choices? Here's a clue. It's usually the thing you're most afraid to want. The thing that seems too big, too risky, too different from what people like you are supposed to pursue. The thing that makes you come alive when you think about it but also makes you terrified, because wanting it would mean admitting that nothing you currently have is enough. That's your authentic desire speaking, and it's been waiting for this moment, this clearing away of everything else to finally be heard. Nietzsche wrote, "Become who you are." But most people never discover who they are because they're too busy being who they think they should be. They spend their entire lives performing a role that was assigned to them by their family, their culture, their circumstances, never questioning whether this role actually fits them or brings out their best qualities. They become successful actors in plays they never auditioned for, starring in stories they never chose to tell. But you, right now, in this moment of complete devastation, you have the opportunity to fire the director, rewrite the script, and cast yourself as the hero of your own story. Not the cautious hero who plays it safe and never risks anything important. Not the tragic hero who blames circumstances for their failures, but the authentic hero who looks at impossible odds and says, "We'll see about that." This kind of heroism isn't flashy. It doesn't make headlines. It's the quiet heroism of choosing growth over comfort, truth over convenience, authenticity over approval. It's the heroism of admitting you were wrong about what you thought you wanted and having the courage to pursue what you actually want instead. It's the heroism of disappointing people who are invested in keeping you small so that you can become large enough to contain your real life. And make no mistake, pursuing your authentic life will disappoint people. It will confuse them. It will threaten them because your courage to change will highlight their choice to stay the same. Some people in your life are there because they love who you really are. Others are there because they love who you pretend to be. Rock bottom shows you the difference. It shows you who stays when you have nothing to offer but your authentic self, and who disappears when you can no longer maintain the performance they've grown comfortable with. This revelation is painful but necessary, because the people who can't love your authentic self were never really your people anyway. They were attracted to your mask, your role, your function in their life, not to the complex, messy, beautiful, evolving person you actually are. Losing them feels like death, but it's actually birth. It's the birth of space in your life for people who can see you clearly and love what they see. Jung said that loneliness is not the absence of other people, but the absence of yourself in the presence of other people. How long have you been lonely in your own life, surrounded by people who know your name but don't know your heart? How long have you been performing connection instead of experiencing it? Rock bottom ends that performance. It strips away the layers of pretense and shows you what real intimacy looks like. Being fully known, fully seen, fully accepted as you are, not as you think you should be. But before others can see you clearly, you have to see yourself clearly. And that means looking at your shadow, your unlived life, your disowned desires, your suppressed anger, your hidden dreams. It means admitting that part of you has always known you were settling, always known you were capable of more, always known that the life you were living was too small for the person you were becoming. Nietzsche called this process becoming who you are, but Jung called it individuation. It's the lifelong process of integrating all aspects of yourself into a coherent whole. The parts you're proud of and the parts you're ashamed of. The parts that fit social expectations and the parts that are wildly, unapologetically unique. The parts that want security and the parts that crave adventure. All of it belongs to you. All of it is part of your authentic self. And here's what's beautiful about rock bottom. It forces this integration. When you lose everything external, you're left with everything internal. When the roles you've been playing are stripped away, you discover the person who was playing those roles. When the identities you've borrowed or inherited collapse, you encounter the identity that's uniquely yours. This isn't comfortable. Integration never is, but it's necessary for any kind of authentic life. The question is, are you ready to be uncomfortable in service of becoming real? Are you ready to disappoint people in service of not disappointing yourself? Are you ready to risk failure in service of avoiding regret? Because that's what rock bottom is offering you. The chance to trade a comfortable lie for an uncomfortable truth. To exchange a life that works on paper for a life that works in your heart. Most people never get this chance. They live and die without ever discovering who they really are, or what they're really capable of. They spend their entire lives trying to fix or improve or perfect the wrong life, instead of having the courage to choose a different life altogether. They polish the cage instead of opening the door. They redecorate the prison instead of planning the escape. But you, right now, the door is open. The cage is destroyed. The prison has crumbled. You are free in the most terrifying and exhilarating way possible. Free to choose based on your values instead of your fears. Free to pursue your vision instead of other people's expectations. Free to become who you are instead of who you think you should be. Nietzsche was right. Rock bottom isn't the end. It's the first real choice you've ever had the courage to make. So what will you choose? Will you choose the familiar pain of a life that doesn't fit? Or the unfamiliar adventure of a life that does? Will you choose to rebuild what you had? Or will you choose to create what you've always wanted? Will you choose to be safe or will you choose to be alive? The choice is yours and it's available right now. What are you waiting for?